Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be doing an analysis of the Nick Fuentes and R.C. Maxwell debate on the Baked Alaska channel. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's about 2 hours long, and I'll just start off right from the back saying that the ethno-nationalist side won. Nick Fuentes absolutely destroyed him at every possible opportunity, and the only debate tactic that Maxwell had was that he sort of skirted around the argument the whole time. He would change the subject, he would do this mile-a-minute word salad shit, and he wouldn't actually address the question or the point that Nick made. So let's break down sort of each point that he made, starting with the idea that Maxwell thinks that ethno-nationalism is uncivilized or barbaric. So that's not an argument, shouldn't have to address that. He says that civic-nationalism is more realistic, quote-unquote, than ethno-nationalism, and what he means by this is that assimilation is more likely than segregation. He believes that you can take a Somali, put them in the Heritage Foundation's Constitution class, and all of a sudden they're going to come out as an American. He fails to understand that to be an American is to accept certain cultural norms, certain religion, and so on and so forth. We've all heard this before, but essentially he thinks that assimilation is more likely than segregation. He also believes that there is no precedence for the ethno-state, and that he denies racial conflict is happening or escalating. He says that racial conflict is diminishing and has been since the 60s. I will say he is completely full of shit. As someone who lives in an area where the majority is Hispanic and black, there is absolutely racial conflict going on a daily fucking basis, and for him to say otherwise is a flat-out lie. And he denies that there will be an escalation in racial violence going into the future. There absolutely will be. There will come a point where you have one identity versus the other, they will clash, and they will vie for power in the United States. We've already seen what the Democrats are trying to do by bringing in these massive foreign people in order to establish a voting bloc. They are going to continue to spark this racial conflict as they have been doing for a very long time. Just look at the Obama presidency and how much racial conflict he started. He also fails to realize that there is racial conflict all around the world that is still going on today. If you look at Africa, the different warring tribes, these different ethnicities, this ethnic conflict that is going on and has been going on for a long time. The argument that's made is that Europeans came in, established these arbitrary sort of borders, which is civic nationalism, and the different tribes and perceived ethnicities within them are still fighting to this day over the power of the state. This is exactly what ethno-nationalists are trying to avoid, this sort of civil war between these different ethnic groups. Now, it's a bit different in Europe and the United States because generally we have a higher intelligence level than Africans, so we avoid war at most times, but it will only get worse from here as the racial conflict is continuously stoked by leftists in the country. Now, on the historical evidence side, in reality, Nick brought up the point, which I brought up as well in my video earlier that day, of World War I, and that the civic nationalist societies of Austria-Hungary, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire, which were one single state residing over many different ethnicities, caused an ethnic conflict which sparked World War I. And what Maxwell fails to understand is that it is the civic nationalists that caused this war. Their attempt to control many different ethnicities under a parliamentary representative democracy system is not going to work. And this gets into the heart of the matter, where you have to understand the innate human preference for your own people. This sort of tribalism is innate to all humans. It is a part of the human condition. And no matter what type of government system you have, if there are multiple ethnicities within the state, they will continuously fight each other for power. It is in-group preference. It is a survival strategy. You cannot breed it out of the population, I don't believe. Even within the most liberal societies in the Western world, you still see the idea of white flight still exists, where these liberal white people who wouldn't consider themselves racist still segregating themselves voluntarily from other racial groups within the United States. So it's innate to all of us, and it's happening all over the world. So to the World War I example, what Maxwell fails to understand is that had there been ethno-nationalist countries, if we had the breakup of the dual monarchy in Austria, for example, you would not have this pan-Slavic movement constantly fighting the pan-German movement in order to take over the monarchy. It's not to say that there would have been no conflict. That's not the ethno-nationalist argument. The argument is that we can mitigate this conflict to a high degree by separating ourselves out. Another thing that Maxwell fails to do is understand the real-world ethnic conflict that's still going on, as I talked about in Africa. You can do it along religious lines, which also falls within ethnic lines as well. Middle East, China, South America, happens everywhere. To the degree at which it gets violent, well, you can kind of dispute, but it's still happening everywhere, and he fails to understand this. Another thing that he does is that he tries to compare right-wing thought, such as ethno-nationalism. If you haven't checked out my Intro to Right-Wing Politics, go check it out. But he fails to understand that the basis, the foundation of right-wing politics are order, hierarchy, authority, and tradition. You cannot be a leftist and believe in any one of these things, okay? So for him to sit there and say that ethno-nationalists are so far to the right that they're actually on the left is so fucking stupid and actually so ill-informed on what the basis of the left-right political divide is that it's not even worth discussing. It really isn't. We've gone through the horseshoe theory thing time and time again. Even Sargon has diminished his horseshoe theory to a large extent. V, I think, is still doing it, but he's a complete retard as well. Doesn't understand the foundations of the left-right divide. So no, ethno-nationalism is in no way, shape, or form close to leftism at all. In fact, Maxwell's position of egalitarianism, of equality before the law, of the Constitution, is actually closer to leftist thought than anything Nick ever brought up. He thinks that anyone can become American, that somehow the magic soil exists, that anyone who comes here can suddenly adopt the culture and assimilate. It just is not akin to reality. It is not actually happening. As I pointed out in my Intro to Right-Wing Politics video, those who are constitutionalists, federalists, sort of the alt-right, as you go towards the center, as you get more and more leftist, you turn towards civic-nationalism. So in actuality, Maxwell is the leftist, not Nick, not the ethno-nationalist. He is more towards the left than any of us. Another thing that Maxwell fails to understand is the idea that America was founded as a white European state for white Europeans and their values. Nick even read off the Federalist Papers. He even read off from Abraham Lincoln, and he just completely dismisses this point as being irrelevant. That to be an American isn't about race or religion or anything like that, which is absolutely foolish. The argument stands on its own. He gets blown the fuck out here as well. And then he actually, if we want to talk about his actual debate tactics, which I'll do now, whenever he gets disproven or a counter argument comes into play, he immediately shifts the topic to something else. So go back and watch when they start talking about the origins of America, he immediately shifts to something else as soon as Nick makes a good point. It's a slimy debate tactic. We see it all the time. When people don't have an argument, they try and skirt around the subject. This happens time and time again within the debate. Also, Maxwell likes to say that he's some kind of college intellectual that's, some high and mighty debater from the college space. And it's like, dude, your debate skills are shit. The only thing that he does is he creates a mile-a-minute word salads that don't actually address the question that Nick brought up and doesn't actually make any points. It's completely ridiculous. It's nonsensical. He looks like an idiot. He sounds like an idiot. He must therefore be an idiot. And if this sort of word salady shit, just throw your ideas out there, just kind of vomit all over the table, if that's what college debate is like, I don't want to be involved in that. Another thing is that he's incredibly rude during this as well. I understand that this is blood sports, but man, you you completely ignored Nick at many points. He's he gets Nick is in the middle of making a point and he stands up and does something else. Dude, just sit there and listen to what Nick has to say. If I'm in an exchange with someone, an exchange of ideas, I'm not going to get up and do something else or distract myself, mainly because I lose focus and I can no longer concentrate on the argument, which very well is apparent. But it's not polite. You're not giving at least some respect to the person you're talking to, which I think is important when it comes to political discourse. Oh, and before I forget, Maxwell literally brings up the "we was Kangs" argument. I could not believe my ears when Nick started talking about, name me a black civilization that's been left to its own devices and has achieved anything as close to the West or the Eastern world, and he literally brought up the we was Egyptians, we was Moors argument. It's so fucking hilarious. It's like when you're resulting to the we was Kangs argument, you've essentially lost. Like there's no coming back from that. You know what I mean? Anyway, if you haven't seen the debate, like I said, go check it out. It's a lot of laughs. If you're new to ethno-nationalism or new to civic nationalism, go check that out and see what not to do and what to do. And thanks for listening.